For the first time, we're actually learning about backroom dealings at the highest levels of that losing president's campaign and Fox News, who you just heard make that call. And we're only learning about this because of the effective billion-dollar case against the Fox empire, which we and other media have been covering because it's a huge deal. Fox News founder Rupert Murdoch cites the Arizona call, what I just showed you, as a defense to argue. He says that the channel reported Trump's loss accurately, which in that moment, on that day, with regard to Arizona, is true. This is what Murdoch says under oath. He always doubted the fraud claims, adding, "We thought everything was on the up and up. I think that was shown when we announced Arizona." Murdoch invoking the clash over the Arizona call to try to defend Fox's independence. And he's also blowing the whistle, in a way, on an apparent effort by Jared Kushner, with Trump yelling in the background, an effort to press Fox into, I guess, what they hoped would have happened instead, to delay or lie about the results to help steal the election. Here are the new details on Murdoch's testimony, which detail Kushner calling, blasting the terrible Arizona call as Trump could be heard, his voice in the background, shouting. Now, one might wonder why Fox, which bended so much to Trump that they're facing this credible defamation suit, is suddenly blowing the whistle on him and on his son-in-law's apparently lying antics. Well, I'll tell you right now, this is Murdoch's strategy. He moves and pivots. He's got a whole HBO media titan character in Succession based on him, based on Murdoch, for those same wily traits. Now, this isn't just some random campaign war story. This is Murdoch on Murdoch, a story by Murdoch that serves Murdoch's current interest in this case, which is to try to present Fox as some sort of numbers-based truth-telling outlet which stood up to Trump. Now, let me be clear. That may be what happened about Arizona. It may be a true exchange. Indeed, it would be pretty dumb for Murdoch to blatantly lie under oath in a trial about his company's lies. But this is also designed to tell a certain piece of the story, and that brings us to the next passage. Again, I told you, as we get this new information, we'll be going through it with you, and this stuff's pretty interesting. Murdoch then relates in this new deposition testimony what he says is his own resistance, describing his own kind of iron, independent backbone. Murdoch telling Kushner, quote, "The numbers are the numbers." Okay. Until they weren't. Because let me be clear and let me be as fair as possible. Had Fox News held that line about the numbers over the following months, there wouldn't be any strong defamation case over lies. There wouldn't be any of this. And, perhaps ironically, because stories do tend to repeat themselves in a way, the arrogance, the way people think they'll never get caught, there wouldn't be, without the change, all these leaked texts and new deposition quotes about top people at Fox to the top of the company. But instead, here we are. Company facing this legal earthquake, aftershocks that range from the cancellation of the Big Lie host, Lou Dobbs, to the Murdoch deposition that's been hitting the papers, as I'm reporting tonight, to these open questions about whether the company will end up paying over $1 billion in punishment. So yes, Murdoch says he told Kushner, the numbers are the numbers. And the numbers led the coverage on that day Trump lost Arizona. I'm telling you that because it's true, and we saw it in public, and in all fairness, on that day, they were accurate about Trump's loss in that state. But that didn't last. The ensuing coverage kept pushing lies about Trump's loss and lies about voting machine companies and these broad attacks on the entire election's legitimacy, which we know helped feed an insurrection, based sometimes on things like a nonsense source of Trump lawyer Sidney Powell, who told Fox in advance they were going to present a story based on what they learned about voter fraud through someone who says they learned about it via time travel and communing with a ghost. Well, as we say on the news, this ain't Rick and Morty. You can't just say you're traveling through time and dimensions to get your stories. Believe me, this show would come together a lot quicker if we did that. And Rupert Murdoch knows that, too. He says under oath, he admits it now. Fox hosts, some of them endorsed that stolen election lie. They didn't just reference it. They didn't just fact check it. They endorsed it long after he had previously said the numbers were the numbers on Trump's loss. Murdoch conceding they pushed crap like this.
Texas rejected using Dominion software 3 times, raising concerns that the system was not safe from fraudulent or unauthorized manipulation.
The election results in several battleground states continued to be under intense focus as allegations of voter fraud are being investigated.
Whether it's Dominion, EBS, whatever the company, voting machine company is, it is the most ludicrous, irresponsible, and rancid system. This is an assault on the core of a democracy.
Many Americans do not believe that this election was fair. I feel that way. Dominion voting machines, they were used in all of Georgia's 159 counties, a state with a razor-thin margin.
Murdoch handicapping his own hosts, throwing some of them basically under the bus, how they lied about Trump's loss. And these increasingly desperate Trump lawyers and Fox enablers needed a story beyond just emoting that they didn't like that everything showed Trump's loss, including their own Fox election desk at one point. So they needed a thief. They needed an enemy. And as you heard there, they often turned on Dominion, which was previously considered a pretty obscure voting company brand name. And it found itself suddenly on the other side of 2 of the most powerful, loud, and aggrieved forces in the nation in late 2020. This losing president who would go on to invite his followers to come to Washington, where they very infamously stormed the Capitol, and these rabid set of teammates at Fox. Now, this new 200-plus page filing by Dominion is damning because of the evidence, not opinions. Opinions don't get you anything in court. It's what they've gathered. When Murdoch is pressed on how the coverage went beyond just interviewing or fact-checking, which is, of course, part of journalism, even about lies or intense claims, he admits it was more than that. It was a platform. And he conceded, well, you've shown me evidence and material in support of that. Fox chief admitting the network basically was part of platforming and supporting and endorsing those lies. Now, Murdoch was not even the only person at the top responsible. Fox has a board which oversees its CEO, at least in theory, and one of the top blue chip members is former Speaker Paul Ryan, who told Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch, the bosses, that Fox News should not be spreading those conspiracy theories. But the lies apparently rated, and while I told you Murdoch is wily, he still is admitting things under oath. He admits that the truth gave way to that pressure of Trump's large following, who were mostly Fox viewers, and it would have been stupid, he argued, to antagonize them with the truth about Trump's loss as the weeks went on. Fox also has executives discussing a profit motive. That's Murdoch's defense, for example, in the specific case of letting a known liar back on the air, Mike Lindell.
I've been all in trying to find the machine fraud, and we found it. We have all the evidence. I have the evidence. I dare people to put it on. I dare Dominion to sue me because then it would get out faster.
He dared Dominion to sue. Ta-da! That's what they did, suing the more powerful and important platform on which he spewed those lies and that now poorly aging dare. Dominion suing Fox. They also, around the same interview, show that Tucker Carlson and his team knew Lindell's claims about Dominion were false in advance, and Murdoch would go on to chide Carlson, again, new from the case, saying it was actually, quote, wrong for Tucker to host Mike Lindell and repeat those allegations against Dominion. Some of these receipts go all the way to the top. And as I've mentioned just about every time we cover this story, there is freedom of speech in America and under our laws. There is a constitutional right to speech. There's no right to maliciously lie or fan an insurrection or to pretend the First Amendment is a total bar and blanket against any consequences after you exercise your freedom of speech. This ain't kindergarten, but yes, actions have consequences. We all learn that sooner or later, one way or another. So we're watching here something pretty significant, a potential legal road to a reckoning that many people feel is long overdue. And I promise you, when I say that, I'm talking about truth, justice, and accountability. I'm not talking about using the courts and tit for tat for political disputes. Settle your politics with debate and voting. And no one who cares about the First Amendment thinks the courts should be misused to go after someone's actual ideas and opinions. Fox News has every right to share all of those. I'll defend that whether people like it or not. But we're talking about a time of polarized politics, blatant, habitual, systemic lying, and right-wing violence. And it's all tied together in these lies. That's the accountability part. The other thing that's interesting, because we tell you the news here, and some of it's just interesting stories, true stories, is that we're getting a rare, deeply reported, fact-checked, under oath look inside parts of this influential right-wing empire. A place where Rupert Murdoch, with over basically 60 years experience in the game, this 91-year-old political media titan, is now selling this defense where he's trying to get everyone to focus on that one call that I showed you, where they were right about Trump losing Arizona. As he says, as he testified, he told Team Trump under pressure, the numbers are the numbers. Now, that's supposed to be a defense tonight. But let me tell you this before I bring in our experts. It's actually kind of incriminating because it shows Rupert Murdoch knew from the start the numbers were the numbers were the facts, the numbers were solid. And that means he and all of those people we showed you here and that are in the filing at Fox, they were wrong to chuck the numbers later for lies. Now, Rupert Murdoch is a survivor. We've never underestimated him here on the beat in the way we cover how he moves. He thinks this is his best play right now. He also has lived a life in politics and business where just about everything is negotiable to him. As another student of politics once explained, most deaf, numbers is hard and real, and they never have feelings. But you push too hard, even numbers got limits. Why did one straw break the camel's back? Here's the secret. The million other straws underneath it. A pile of lies, finally possibly catching up with Fox. Whether it breaks the camel's back for $1 billion is actually the next question in this high-stakes case.